My fiancé, mom forced my BF to kick me out of our apartment. Because of this, I lost my job, my friends, and the life I was building. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. Please like, share with your family and friends, and subscribe to this channel for your support means a lot to us. I never imagined leaving Sierra Azul would feel so heavy. Packing my life into suitcases, saying goodbye to my family and friends, and flying across the ocean to Luminara to be with Lucas. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. Lucas had asked me to move so we could finally live together, while he focused on his studies and work. I wanted to be there for him, to show him love, but I had no idea what awaited me. From the moment I arrived, tension hung in the air like a shadow I couldn't shake. Lucas's parents, Ingrid and Thomas, lived less than an hour away, yet they barely reached out. Ingrid's polite smile never quite reached her eyes, and her questions often cut deeper than I expected. She asked about my parents' finances, about my upbringing, about things no one had ever questioned before. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was cultural differences or my own nerves. But something in her gaze made me uneasy. The first weeks in Luminara were exhausting. I spent my days learning German and hunting for work. My evenings filled with navigating bureaucratic forms and unfamiliar streets. Every interaction with the outside world felt like a test. Ingrid seemed to notice every mistake I made, every hesitation in my words. She would ask questions in ways that felt cruel, almost deliberate, about things that didn't matter, tests that I didn't even know I was taking. I forced myself to laugh, but inside, a knot of tension grew with every interaction. Still, I wanted to connect, to be accepted. I baked, cooked, painted gifts, and helped around their home whenever I could. I thought showing goodwill would be enough, but I could feel it. Ingrid was always watching, always judging, always testing me in ways I couldn't fully understand. And I didn't yet know that this was only the beginning, that her manipulations would escalate, that the life I had dreamed of in Luminara would be threatened, and that I would soon have to fight back, not just for my relationship with Lucas, but for my very sense of self. The first few months in Luminara were harder than I could have imagined. I spent my days navigating the labyrinth of paperwork for my residence permit, and my nights practicing German, repeating words until my tongue ached. Every interaction felt like walking on glass. I never knew which step would shatter the fragile balance I was trying to create. Lucas was my anchor, but even he seemed to struggle with the tension that hung over his family. Ingrid's subtle criticisms were constant, like whispers in the background of every conversation. She asked about my parents' income, about my education, about things that had nothing to do with me living here. And I realized later that she had actually researched my father's finances behind my back. That knowledge made her judgment sting even more. I tried to ignore it, to focus on connecting with them in any way I could. I baked, I cooked, I made little gifts, and even painted a small landscape for their living room. I helped Lucas around the apartment, tried to join family dinners, and smiled even when Ingrid's gaze felt cold and calculating. Yet nothing seemed to break through. She would subtly test my German, asking me to read or speak in ways that were unnecessarily complicated, then remarking when I hesitated. It felt like every step forward was met with scrutiny. Despite the challenges, I refused to give up. I reminded myself why I was here, to support Lucas, to build a life together. But every day I noticed how the atmosphere shifted whenever Ingrid or Thomas were around. Finding a job in Luminara was harder than I imagined. Every application felt like a test, every interview like a performance. I couldn't afford to fail. I worked long hours studying German, learning the customs, and trying to adapt to a world that seemed so different from Sierra Azul. I wanted to prove to Lucas's parents, and to myself, that I could thrive here. But Ingrid made it impossible to feel comfortable. She never offered help or guidance. Instead, she reminded Lucas constantly that my permit was about to expire, that I might have to leave. She watched, waited, and subtly criticized every effort I made. Even small mistakes in my German became evidence, in her mind, that I was unfit, manipulative, or not serious. I tried to maintain composure. I baked bread, prepared dinners, and left little notes expressing gratitude. I painted small gifts, hoping kindness could break the ice. But nothing seemed to reach her. Ingrid's cold smile and subtle eye rolls were constant reminders that I was being judged, measured against standards I didn't even know existed. Some nights, I lay awake, wondering if I had made a mistake coming here. I questioned whether my love for Lucas was enough to survive this environment. He tried to comfort me, to remind me that we were a team. But I could see the pressure he felt. 2. He was caught between me and the family he had always known. And yet, I refused to give up. I reminded myself that this was my life too, that I had every right to exist here without fear. Deep down, I knew Ingrid and Thomas were waiting, not for me to succeed, but for me to falter. And every day that I persisted, no matter how small the victories, I was quietly fighting back, showing resilience even in the face of their constant judgment. I didn't yet know how far they would go, or what it would cost to survive their games. I kept trying. Every day I reminded myself that I had chosen this life because I loved Lucas, because I believed in us, and every day, I tried to make the best of the situation with his parents. I baked bread and pastries, cooked meals I hoped would impress, and even painted a small landscape for their living room. I sent cards for holidays, small gestures meant to show that I wanted to connect. Yet despite my efforts, Ingrid's scrutiny never ceased. She never openly criticized me, but her sharp glances and subtle remarks stung more than any direct confrontation could. Thomas remained mostly silent, but the way he observed me made it clear he was quietly judging as well. I began to notice patterns, tiny tests that were almost invisible unless you were looking closely. A question about my family, a comment about my German, a subtle expectation I couldn't meet. Still, I refused to back down. I reminded myself that these small acts of goodwill weren't about approval. They were about asserting my place in this new world. I tried to be patient, to smile even when it hurt, to show kindness even when I felt hurt. But it became exhausting. Every effort I made seemed to be met with indifference or worse, suspicion. In the quiet moments, I began to realize that Ingrid and Thomas were not just uninterested in connecting. They were watching, testing, waiting for a misstep. It wasn't enough that I had moved countries, learned a new language, and worked tirelessly to prove myself. To them, every success I achieved was a challenge. Every kindness a potential trap. I felt a chill whenever I thought about it. This wasn't just about acceptance. It was a game I hadn't agreed to play, and one that could cost me everything if I lost. Finally, after months of struggle, I got a call I had been dreaming of. Hugo Boss wanted to hire me. My heart leapt with excitement, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. I had worked tirelessly, navigating a new language, unfamiliar bureaucracy, and the constant scrutiny of Lucas's parents. And now my perseverance had paid off. I couldn't wait to tell Lucas. His smile when I shared the news was genuine, and for a moment I felt safe, supported, and loved. But I also knew the real challenge was yet to come. Ingrid. How would she react to my success? We were preparing for a family holiday trip, a rare opportunity to spend time with Ingrid and Thomas in their vacation home. I hoped the news of my job would soften Ingrid, show her that my intentions were sincere, that I wasn't some naive girl drifting into their lives. I wanted her to see that I was capable, hardworking, and committed, not the threat she seemed to believe I was. When I told them, Ingrid's smile seemed warm, but there was a flicker in her eyes I couldn't read. Thomas clapped politely, but I sensed a weight behind his gaze. They acted happy, outwardly. Dinner passed with laughter and small talk, but the air was thick with tension. Later, Lucas pulled me aside. He hesitated, then admitted something that froze me. Ingrid had confided in him that she thought I was a narcissist, manipulative, and not to be trusted. All my efforts, all my sacrifices, meant nothing to her. My first real victory in Luminara had already been overshadowed by their judgment. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about acceptance. It was a battle, and the stakes were higher than I could have imagined. I would have to fight, not just for my place in Luminara, but for my dignity, my relationship, and my very life there. The day of my birthday arrived, and I had hoped it would be a moment of celebration, a brief reprieve from the constant tension. I dressed carefully, wearing the outfit I had bought for the occasion, hoping my effort might at least earn a genuine smile from Ingrid. Lucas walked beside me, reassuring me that no matter what happened, we were a team. I clung to that thought like a lifeline. When we arrived at their home, the atmosphere seemed light. Ingrid greeted me warmly. Thomas smiled politely, and for a moment, I dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be normal. They wished me a happy birthday, gave me small gifts, and I felt a flutter of relief. Perhaps my months of effort had finally been noticed. But later that night, Lucas pulled me aside and told me the truth. Ingrid had confessed to him that her happiness was fake. She had told him that she believed I was manipulative, a narcissist, and that our relationship would never work. Her justification, a trivial moment, our dog had pooped once. and Lucas had cleaned it instead of me. That was the proof she used to judge me. I froze, a cold shock running through me. The celebration, the smiles, the gifts, they had all been part of her judgment. A test to see if I could be manipulated or intimidated. I felt disgusted, violated, and utterly powerless. The family I had tried to connect with had been pretending all along, watching, judging, and waiting for me to fail. I asked Lucas if we could leave early, unable to breathe in that suffocating atmosphere. I realized then that nothing I did would earn their approval. My only choice was to protect myself, and to fight not by proving them wrong, but by refusing to let them define me. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a battle that would test every ounce of my strength. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about everything Ingrid had said to Lucas. The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined. I had poured months of effort, kindness, and patience into this family, and it had been met with judgment and deception. For the first time, I realized I couldn't just endure anymore. I needed to fight back, even if it meant confronting uncomfortable truths. I asked Lucas to talk with his parents on my behalf. We drafted a careful letter together, explaining that their constant judgment, intrusive questions, and manipulative tests were unacceptable. We reminded them that I was part of their family now, and that respect was not optional. It wasn't meant to be confrontational. It was meant to set boundaries, to draw a line that could no longer be crossed. Delivering the message was nerve-wracking. I waited, heart-pounding, for their reaction. I wanted them to understand, to see that I wasn't a threat, that I had every right to exist in Luminara as an equal member of this family. But their response was immediate and cold. They refused to acknowledge our feelings, insisting that Lucas choose between me and them. The ultimatum was devastating. I felt my world shift, all my hard work, all the months I had spent adapting, building a career, learning a language. It was as if it didn't matter. Lucas, conflicted and afraid of defying his parents, wavered. I could see his love for me, but also the grip his parents had on him. That night, I knew I had to make a choice: cower under their manipulation or stand firm. For the first time, I chose myself. I refused to beg or compromise my dignity. I realized that fighting back wasn't about winning their approval. It was about reclaiming my life, my boundaries, and my sense of self. The day after Lucas delivered the ultimatum from his parents, I felt a mix of sorrow and clarity. I had invested so much, my heart, my time, my effort, but it had never been enough for them. Ingrid and Thomas were not interested in family. They were invested in control. I knew staying would mean sacrificing my dignity, my career, and my sanity. I began quietly preparing to leave Luminara. I reached out to friends I had made during my months there, carefully closing doors on apartments and work opportunities that were entangled with their influence. Every decision I made felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself that had been trapped under their judgment. I also documented every incident, every intrusion, every cruel comment. I wanted to ensure that if this conflict escalated, I had proof of the manipulation I endured. Lucas was conflicted. I could see his love for me, but also his fear of defying his parents. He begged me to stay, to compromise, to try one more time, but I had made my choice. Love could not survive in a world ruled by control and ultimatums. The day I left, I packed my belongings with trembling hands, hugging Lucas tightly, trying to convey everything words could not. We cried together, mourning the life we could have had. But I felt a spark of empowerment. Leaving wasn't losing, it was taking back the life that was mine. Even as I boarded the plane back to Sierra Azul, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was no longer living under the shadow of manipulation. I realized that fighting back wasn't always about confrontation. Sometimes, it was about reclaiming your freedom and walking away from those who would never respect you. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a journey to rebuild, to heal, and to prove, to myself, that I was stronger than any obstacle or judgment placed in my path. Back in Sierra Azul, I felt the weight of everything I had lost, but also the first flickers of freedom. I was far from Luminara, away from Ingrid and Thomas's judgment, away from Lucas's impossible position, between love and obedience. For the first time in months, I could breathe without fear, without constantly second-guessing every action. I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends, spent time with my family, and sought new professional opportunities. I realized I had skills, resilience, and determination that no one could take away. Every small success, every genuine smile from someone who cared, reminded me that my worth was not tied to Ingrid and Thomas's approval. The lessons were hard, but valuable. I learned that kindness doesn't guarantee acceptance, that effort isn't always rewarded, and that love alone cannot survive manipulation. Most importantly, I learned that boundaries are sacred, and protecting them is not selfish, it is essential. One day, I received a message from Lucas. He admitted how difficult it had been, how much he had struggled to stand up to his parents, and how sorry he was for not fighting harder. It hurt, but I also understood him. Our love had been real, but the circumstances had made it impossible to thrive. I wrote back with honesty, expressing forgiveness, but also explaining that I had to move forward on my own terms. By the end of the chapter, I realized something profound. I had survived a storm that could have broken me, and instead, I had grown stronger. My independence, my dignity, and my sense of self had been reclaimed. I was no longer living for approval. I was living for me. I knew the final chapter of this journey was approaching, and it would not be about pain or loss. It would be about triumph, resilience, and freedom. Back in Sierra Azul, I finally felt a sense of clarity I had not experienced in months. The battle with Ingrid and Thomas had cost me Lucas, my apartment, and the life I had started building in Luminara, but it had also revealed something essential: my strength, my independence, and my right to boundaries. I refused to let their manipulation define me. I began documenting every interaction I had endured: the texts, the calls, the tests, and the lies. I sought advice from legal and expat support networks, making sure I was prepared if their attempts to control or discredit me escalated. I wanted to protect myself, not just emotionally but practically. Then came a moment of reckoning. I reached out to Lucas one last time, not to plead, not to beg, but to assert my truth. I explained calmly that love without boundaries was impossible, that I had survived their manipulations, and that my dignity could not be compromised. It was not about winning him back. It was about reclaiming my power. I also began to rebuild my professional life. I found new opportunities, reconnected with mentors, and embraced independence. Every small success reminded me that my value was intrinsic, not contingent on anyone's approval. Weeks later, I learned a secret. Ingrid and Thomas were struggling financially, desperate to maintain appearances, and their attempts to control me had been fueled by fear, not truth. That knowledge shifted something inside me. I no longer felt anger or despair. I felt triumph. I had survived. I had fought back, not with aggression, but with courage, boundaries, and self-respect. I had lost a life, but I had found myself, and in that victory, I understood the most important lesson. Even when people try to take everything from you, the real power is in standing firm, walking away, and choosing your freedom. I was free, I was whole, and I was stronger than ever. Thank you for watching. Till the end, please don't forget to like, share with your family and friends, and subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories.